How comfortable are you with your own players diving, cheating, etc., despite calling out opposition players for doing the exact same thing? So how comfortable are you with your own players diving?
No, I don't like diving, if I'm honest, like the outright dives. That I think that's wrong. I think there's a distinction between that and buying a foul, if I'm honest, but that's the...
Win is a win.
I guess that's debate. And
No.
finding ways of winning is really important when the margins can be so fine in a low-scoring game. But there is a difference between diving and, like trying to really kid people along and finding a contact in the penalty box when someone is rash in their defending. The other thing now is we can replay events 100 times and slow them down and they look horrific. But when someone is working at full pelt, full pace, and they get a tiny touch, like they're probably going to lose balance in that moment and go to ground. And sometimes it looks soft or sometimes it doesn't get given. And it isn't a dive, and you get the old thing as well. It's either a book in and dive him or it's a penalty. And sometimes it just, like, people fall over. It happens. People can take a contact and it isn't a foul and they're on the ground and he hasn't dived. It's just like the way the game has unravelled. So I think there's an element of, tactical fouls. Let's be honest, if you're 1-0 up with a minute to go and you need to take someone down to stop them scoring, you're probably going to do it. And you're probably going to be in a bit of stick from everybody if you don't, because that's like you're playing to win. So I think it's just part of strategy. In the end, fouls are a way of stopping an attack. Now, you'll probably have a preference of where you give them away and what your balance behind the ball is. If you're really outnumbered and open and you're going to get counter-attacked and get killed in an attacking moment, you've got to stop that attack somehow, either by brilliant defending, or if you can't in that moment, you have to make a foul. You have to make a foul. I think that's just I just think that's sensible.
I do too. I think it's yes, it's dark if you want to go down that sort of purity road, but I think it's about being competitive.
And I think there's a bit of the English game that we love, and it exists at every games, but the ones that are full throttle and are really aggressive games, that's what you like. So you want contact in the game, and therefore you want to be able to slug it out with an opponent, and then you get up and shake each other's hands and say, fair play, that was a good scrap at times.
So here's another question. Do you ever use dark arts or mind games to gain a competitive advantage? And also kind of on the back of that, is there ever something that have you fallen for a trap once on your journey in terms of that, the mind games and things like that, or is there something that you've seen someone else do and go, oh, that's good, I'll have that?
I think the mind games at the top level can be quite good. Like Ferguson was the master, wasn't it, United? And I don't know, I don't think so much of that exists at our level or the level I've been at. Not so much. It's certainly not something I've really got into. The dark arts bit, it's like, what's the line of dark arts? I don't know. Like game management, buy a foul, stop a foul, take time over restarts, make sure that there's 2 balls on the pitch so you can't start, kick a ball while it's rolling for a free kick because it has to come back and you're playing for time. Correct. Any little thing like that. If your goalkeeper go down for treatment, he doesn't have to come off the pitch where every other position does. Having a tactical drinks break halfway through a half, you see that happening. There's loads. Is it dark arts that Ivan Toney moves the ball around the wall? I think that's clever. Everyone gets slaughtered for it. I think that's really clever play. It's up to everyone else to adapt to that. So, I don't know. There's a line between the two. Do we like cheating? No. But there is a muddy line. Exactly. And in the end, if you're the team that wins in those moments, you probably find it quite funny and say it's winning. And on the emotional day when it goes against you, you're fuming.
MC asks, when things aren't going well, do you ever build up resentment for your own fans who have lost belief in the process? I read a great article with you on Coach's Voice, and you said that you were a Cambridge fan and you kind of had to stop that because fans are erratic and they go from one side to the other all the time. I thought that was I thought it was refreshing, but to the wrong fan, to the erratic fan, maybe like a bit brave to say something like that. So like that concoction of, as we spoke about earlier, the noise of the fans around you and the up and down nature and the ability for everyone to have a voice, which will be a question later on, that must sort of poke at you as a manager in terms of that word resentment, which I know is probably a bit of a loaded word for you.
Yeah, so, I mean, first of all, it's never that's not a criticism of football fans, and there's a scale, isn't there? Some just go and it's quite calm and it's a nice thing to do at the weekend. Some are very, very emotional and from one extreme to the other. I think the point I was trying to make there is you have to have emotional control and intelligence when you're taking a team to make decisions for the right reason. based more in logic than emotion, even though emotion can be quite important, and therefore being a fan in the dugout is probably not a recipe for consistent success.
Yeah.
So that would be my point. Now, I don't think resentment's the right word, because my personal belief is, like, if you succeed, you do it together, and actually you really need a connection between the football side of your club and the people within the club, the players and the supporters, no doubt. And they're there in the worst moments and the best moments, and incredibly loyal to you along the way. And they have every right to express their anger, joy, disappointment. That's just life. So I don't think resentment's the right thing. And also, we deal in extremes quite a lot. So if we say, and everyone's lost belief in the process, I mean, it wouldn't be everyone. We'd convince ourselves it's everyone because a certain number of people comment on it or whatever. Or in my view, if a lot of people keep coming to the games, they've probably not lost complete belief in it. So if you play in front of an empty stadium, I'd say everyone's lost belief in it.
Yeah.
Or are just doing the dutiful thing as being a supporter, and I'm going because I have to, and this is what I do.
So for you as a manager, again, like the sort of the help and the hindrance of the fans is a very difficult one. And it's something that I'm guessing you have to reframe a little bit, like you said there, in terms of, because people that don't like something are often louder than the ones that are okay.
Yeah, it's usually the sort of silent majority, actually,
Yeah.
quite often. And look, the online bit's a whole nother kettle of fish, isn't it? I think, like, someone can write a 3-second post that, like, you've really hurt you really quickly, but who knows what mood they were in when they did that, or why they did it. And some people just do it to get reaction and to love the nibble out of people all the time. Whereas when you're a football manager, if you don't get engaged in that too much, you've probably got a week until you have to go and face the people again. So in some respects, it's quite easy. You can go back into your bubble of your players and your people and that you work with and crack on. But that connection with people is so important. So I wouldn't say it's resentment. I would say it can be used as real motivation and fuel towards, really narrowing your focus on, right, we've got to up the ante and get this right, because I think doubt can be an amazing motivator. I don't think self-doubt is, personally, but I think doubt is. When people doubt you, it's a great opportunity to... I actually don't believe in the philosophy of proving those people wrong, but I do believe in the proving yourself right. And therefore, when people doubt you, I think it's a great opportunity to say, do you know what, I'm going to show people how good I am, because I know I am.
This is at Pompey Cry. How much of an impact does negativity from social media have on the staff and players?
I think it's probably unique to every individual how much you engage in social media, and on what platforms and on how many platforms. And
do you have any rules when it comes to that in terms of the group? Is it a conversation you'll have with the group?
There's certainly a set of rules from a club in terms of what you can and can't say and how you behave online. In terms of, like, the agreed principles, I think that's really difficult, because in a dressing room you've got people that are from, I don't know, you could be 16 years old to 36 years old. That's a vast difference there in what life looks like for them, and on how much, if you're at the older age of the spectrum, you might not have grown up with it, but you've become used to using social media. And if you're 16, 17, 18, you've probably, like, not known anything else. It's just the world that you grow up in and you live on. So to tell people not to use it would be ridiculous, because there is such value in being in a network and online. But there is no doubt that somehow, and I don't know the science behind this, it feels like we're wired to find the negative comment rather than the multiple, the ones that make you feel good. And so, yes, definitely it has an impact on people's performances or mood. And I wish it didn't, but it always will have, because we're human. And then it's down to everybody to learn, right, how much of this do I need to engage in? When do I need to be online, offline, and so on? And the sort of danger is you get into a habit of posting when things have gone well and hiding when things haven't. And that's not a good place to be in either. So you've either got to be all in or all out, really.
In terms of sort of being able to see it in people, what percentage, I mean, obviously it's going to be a ballpark figure, but what percentage do you think of the sort of mental issues that you'll have with a group of young men who are in the spotlight, whose, happiness or misery is based around 90 minutes of football? How much do you think of the percentage of those problems that you face are based around are affected by something like social media? Do you think it's more that than internal things?
I don't know, because there is a large amount that don't engage really. So I'd find it really difficult to put.
Sorry, don't engage with social media.
Yeah, I'd say so. Yeah, and I think like in the end, it's just another, and it's a big part. It's another big thing that's in the pot that can influence the way you feel and the way you behave and the way you act and how you feel about yourself. In the end, you probably, this is really hard to get away from. Your identity as a person is almost judged on how you're doing if you're playing, and if you're fit. And then how you play and like it's so short term usually in leagues. You're a couple of years at a club and then it's like, oh, when next? And that's a really difficult career to find.
And so cutthroat, right? So disposable as well. Both the players and and the managers, obviously, as well, even more so for the managers. That, again, another contradiction that's very difficult, I'd imagine, to deal with on an emotional level.
And quite often, because the cycle is quite short-term with coaches, often coaches change things with players, and therefore that it just becomes a bit of a vicious cycle sometimes. And sometimes that change can be good and can work. And there's examples where change gives real success, and sometimes it's very, very short-term. It can have a good instant impact, and then it fizzles out. It's really difficult. There's not one way of seeing it and doing it, but that disposable nature of the game and that judgment that you're constantly under, it's not something you're going to change. It's also not something you can complain about. It just is. So what is really important as you're growing up and you're attacking that, and then as a group of staff and in your environment, is working out, right, we've got to support that, as well as understanding that whilst we're developing all these things, in 3 days' time we've got another game that we have to win, and if we don't, we're probably getting slaughtered. Like that's just the way it is.
It's crazy, isn't it?
And it is crazy, but it's kind of fun too.
It must be so exciting, that opportunity to implement, the culture, the environment, and tactics and relationships and all those things. I can feel it from you that you have such an energy for that challenge.
That's because I've not done it for ages.
Khalil says, if winning meant sabotaging young talent and not developing your players, would you still do it?
This is probably a long way round answering this question. Every club will have a idea of, number one, how good are their young players and how important is it for the club's idea that they get developed within the team. Therefore, if one of the huge driving things of your club is to develop and produce young players, then obviously part of how you're judged as a coach is going to be how often they play and how much opportunity they get within the team. In the end, and you can have a lot of KPIs, in the end, the number one judgment factor will always be winning. So I think you can aspire to win, and you can do lots of other good things, and developing young players is part of that. But in the end, part of that process is those players have to be able to contribute towards wins. And sometimes it's slow, that they have to go in and out the team, and they have to build a step towards your team by potentially going out on loan somewhere else first. And that's part of the longer term plan. If the question is, and I don't think age comes into this, if there's a player on the pitch that in a moment is not contributing towards a win, or is going to have a detrimental impact on you winning the game, do you take them off? Yeah, and their age doesn't really matter. Like if you've got someone better equipped to go on the pitch than them, then you're going to make those changes. I don't think that you're sabotaging young players in that situation, and sometimes that isn't part of your job. It isn't like, right, how many of the young ones can you get in the team and sell? So I think it depends really on what the plan is and the idea is to start with. I think you can develop every player, and I think every player has to deal with the consequences that sometimes you're in the team, sometimes you're out the team.
With the substitutions, just one that popped into my head there was, in terms of a substitution when you're sort of standing on the touchline, what percentage of those are sort of gut feelings of like, yeah, no, I think you're tired now? And how many of those are very structured and kind of within the plan for you?
Well, some can be pre-planned, either physically because a player is played a lot of games, or that they're on their way back from injury and they may only be able to get to a certain point in the game. And that's where a team is really important. You're guided by the expertise around you in the physical corner that can tell you those things. And so you go into a game knowing that someone might have to come off at a certain point. Some of them could be strategy based in the fact that you feel like you're going to change at some point in the game, or the opposition make really common changes at a certain point, and when they make those changes, you're going to counter it with a change. Right. And so they can be pre-planned in that sense. quite often you can go into a game with a plan and realise actually the game doesn't play out as you planned, and therefore you react on the spot. And a lot of it is probably that. Quite often, the most important 20 minutes of the week, I used to say, was 4:30 onwards on a Saturday, because you plan all week, you have an idea, but at that point, sometimes the game is the game, and you're reacting to the events of the game. And I think 5 subs this season in a lot of leagues has changed the game a little bit, that you see more subs being made on 40 at half-time than ever, because it's your extra opportunity to make subs. So there's a big change there in the way in which substitutions are used. The language around substitutions has changed. A lot of people use starters and finishers that they've taken from other sports to try to make it a little bit less frustrating for the players. Like,
match winners,
you're still the sub, like it's still the same thing, but
sorry, you've been picked.
You can frame it in different ways. Sometimes it's important to have players that can change a game later on when it opens up. So I think there's loads of options there. I mean, one of the criticisms I know that I came under in my time was being quite low sub-making coach. Right. And it's really, really simple, this. If you look over the 3.5-4 years of doing the job, the most subs were made when the bench was the strongest. So when you've got really good options that can make you better, quite naturally you're going to make more changes in that period. So that would be the first thing. The second thing is, this clamour for change can happen over a long period of time. It can also happen in every single 90 minutes that, this isn't working, so we have to change. I think the best example I can give is one of the biggest criticisms of our promotion season from League 2 to 1 was the low number of changes that we made. But if you look at the number of games we won late on, the match winners were on the pitch. You just needed time for it to come. And therefore, one easy criticism is that a coach can't make a decision or won't make one. And actually choosing not to make a sub is a decision. Sticking rather than twisting is a decision. So did I, as a coach, and everyone would answer this, make some wrong ones? 100%. Some match-winning ones and some that didn't help at all. Didn't make some when I should and made some when I shouldn't, or made some for all the right reasons, but it just didn't turn out how I wanted, because there's another team doing it too, and there's a whole host of variables that can dictate the outcome of a game. But substitutions is a fascinating part and a really important part of the game.
That 4:30 to full time, I was just thinking there, is aside from a goal, that's the buzz, is it? It's that little, because there's even, I imagine obviously the first half it's unfolding, isn't it? But in that, for you as a manager, that 4:30 onwards, that's the sort of, that's the lightning in the bottle for you in terms of the buzz of it all.
Yeah, it's the toughest bit, because it's the bit where you have to work fastest, and the opposition are doing the same. So it's often substitute time 60-minute onwards, but certainly 70. You start to see changes in shape, changes in strategy, changes in players, and it's adapting to that. And then you have the idea of, are you going to be proactive and make the change first, or are you going to be reacting to the opposition? The constant questions you're asking yourself on the touchline is, how are we hurting them? How are they hurting us? Is the game in balance, and are we all right with that? Because actually the game being balanced is fine with the scoreline as it is, whether we're up or whatever. Sometimes staying in a game and then thinking, right, we've got our sleeves, last 10 minutes, we're going for it. But if we go too early, this could get... So there's a whole host of things. And actually quite often, well, no one else in the ground knows that, do they? So a real classic shout at football managers is, you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. The actual truth is, you don't know what I'm doing. And that's where the difficulty comes all the time.
Amazing. That's fascinating. Tom W. At Porks and Henry, is his name. He said, are some players too big / hard to drop? I.e., have you always named your most deserving, best in-form starting 11?
Most deserving, best, and informed can be 3 different categories.
He's trying to get you again, isn't he? Deserving.
They can probably be all different categories. Like sometimes your most informed players, or the most deserving, someone who's absolutely smashing it in training, but the team are winning and in a really good flow, they don't get in the team, even though they probably deserve to be in the team. Maybe not. Most informed players, maybe not, because you feel like a certain player is right for a certain game. So, I've had situations where we'd pick a team, prep the team. There's your 11 players going into the game. The game gets called off on the day. You have a game Tuesday, and a couple of players have taken out the team for the Tuesday game. And they're like, well, what have I done wrong? I didn't even play. And the point is, like, trying to get the point across that, like, we're picking a team for a certain game. So that's a common scenario. So I think that answers that part. And And then the other part of that, is anyone too big to drop? I don't think anyone's too big, but sometimes it can be more difficult to leave certain players out than others. Maybe because of character, maybe because of their importance within the group, or the leadership that they have, or the sometimes their physical profile, whether it's the pace that you're going to need in certain area of the pitch, or the size to defend and attack set plays, or if it's a set play taker, they may be really important to that part of the game. So I think there's lots of considerations to think of in those moments. But the truth is, you pick the team that you think's the right one in any given moment. And sometimes you pick a team and people that judge that don't know the backstory of how someone's trained that week, or the issues that they've had during the week, or anything like that can be a big contributing factor. You pick the team that you think's the best one, and you have to leave out big players at different times. That's just the way it is.
Do managers expect to be sacked before even taking a job?
Wow, I've literally never thought of it like that.
That is brutal, isn't it? Now, I guess the thing is like, this again has come back to the contradiction thing. Is like, if you are sort of cynically based, then I think that would be a mindset that you might pop into your head for a second. But you have to believe, I'm guessing.
Yeah, I mean, it's an
not
inevitable.
That you're going to be there forever.
It is an inevitable consequence of the industry that you will leave the club. Maybe sacked, but in the end you sign a fixed term contract. So as a maximum, you sign for 3 years at a club. You're there for 3 years. Now you might not be, but you know there's an end point. The bit is you're not in control of when that end point is to some extent. So one of the inevitable bits is you're gonna get sacked and lose your job. I lost mine. I egotistically loved the thought that it will end there at some point, but I'd love it to be on my terms, not on the club's. But that
should be the desire, though, right?
Of course, yeah. And in the end, like, if your starting point is, oh, this is going to end, that's a fairly bleak way of looking at it. You're full of energy and love, and it's no different to being a football fan. Like, however bad things are, if you're an optimist like me, you go to the game thinking, today's the day. Today we're going to be brilliant. Today we're going to win, and you might be bottom of the league playing the top, but this is the day we're going to be the story this weekend that creates the surprise. And I think even though that there's limitations and there is an end point, I don't think you live your life thinking about dying, do you? You live your life thinking about living and what you're going to do about it.
Well, the meaning of life is death, I guess, a little bit. So it's kind of just like, well, let's make an impact whilst we can. In terms of being sacked, what's the process of being sacked? Is it just like do you get a text and you're like, I think this is it, love? Like, what is the process?
Well, I can talk about the process from my exit. I mean, it's probably different. I've witnessed it in different ways. So I think there's a number of ways. I think there is sometimes a manager might know that they're going beforehand, and therefore they get a chance to almost say their goodbyes and all sorts. And you can plan your departure. Sometimes it can be you see the timing. Sometimes it's 3 or 4 days after a game. Sometimes it's half an hour after a game. I've seen that this season. Sometimes it's the night of the game, but it's not announced till the next day, which was in my case. We'd lost on the Tuesday. I spoke to the owner on the phone an hour after the game, and it got announced the next morning. I think there's lots of different ways of doing it, and lots of different people that might deliver the news, whether it's in person, whether it's a sporting director who's dispensing of a head coach, might be an owner, a chairman, a director. I guess that depends on their involvement in the process of employing somebody and their location at the time. So more often than not, you'd want to do it face to face. Mine was a phone call because the owner's abroad, so that's absolutely fine. But we had a very strong agreement that he was the one that offered me the job, and if ever it ended, he would be the one that ended it as well, and that's absolutely right. So we then met a week or so later in person when he was over, so no problem there. But I think it's probably different in lots of different cases.
Is an interesting one. What's your opinion on agents? Generally known as the bad guys.
Yeah, I mean, it's a bit unfair, really. I mean, there's some brilliant people that do a really good job. And in the end, like in every job, there's probably some bad ones that create a bad reputation. Now, one of the things that can be seen is there is a huge amount of money that goes into the agency world. Now, sometimes that's right and fine because they do a really important job to get people jobs or to find players, coaches, staff for clubs. So an agency, almost a recruitment agent, that's just a job that exists everywhere. There's a lot of talk, I think, around what should be the limits to the finance that they can receive from deals and clubs, and that's for much brighter people than me that know that world. But I do think that players and coaching staff and things would find it much harder to negotiate themselves good deals and contracts and be well protected without them. So I think that they fulfil a really important function. The debate will always be, could the money be controlled to be spent in better ways to make football more sustainable across the pyramid? But that's a completely different conversation. I think they play an important role.
Do managers ever get tired or broken down despite being successful? And I think with all of these, if you don't mind, of course it's great to get your own experience, but I'm sure you sort of have conversations all the time with other managers as well. Kind of getting a better understanding of that role. Last week I spoke to Dan. The thing that I find so interesting of that management role is that you've just got so many people sort of taking like your bandwidth. So like even in a successful period, are there moments when you get home and the travel? That's the other thing I think people don't think about. You turn on the screen and you're in Carlisle, and then the next week you're in Exeter. Like, has there been moments where you kind of like, you get home and you're just like, wow, I am like next level tired?
Oh yeah, 100%. And I think that's just probably everyone experiences that in their own way. But we have an incredible resilience and ability to bounce back as humans. It's amazing how good sleep can be if you can get it. You can come back quite refreshed quite quickly, and you just become ingrained in being in the washing machine or on the hamster wheel, whatever you want to call it, where you're just like, here we go again. And it can become a bit Groundhog Day. A football season is long. It is long. And obviously it's played through the winter months, which is pretty depressing as well. Like, it can be dark driving in, dark driving out, cold, wet, windy. Like it's just what it is. So in all of these conversations, what I wouldn't want to be is like almost saying, oh yeah, everyone needs to be protected from this. You are fighting against the wall if you think you can change society to be really respectful and thoughtful to everybody's mental health in football. Like what the answer is making sure people have the equipment and the tools to cope and strive and be resilient in that, because that is what it is and it isn't changing. And high level sport and competitiveness, professional sport, is that you have to win and you have to be hard-nosed and resilient. And
relentless was a word that was used last week, which I thought again was interesting in terms of the mix between open and looking after yourself and taking a second and then being relentless as well. That must be hard for both managers and players.
Of course, and part of being successful or being able to be at your best is about being fresh in an environment in a football season that is every year becoming harder to do that. I just look at football over. I think next season is the first year since pre-COVID that will be on a normal calendar and a normal schedule. Football's been interrupted for 4 years because of COVID, because of a Winter World Cup, where the start dates and end dates have become earlier and later, where there's been a number of international fixtures added, where European competitions have got bigger, and there's only a desire to include or improve or increase the number of games that people play. And that is madness, to expect the same product and ask more of people all the time. It's just impossible, humanly impossible, physically and also mentally, to be motivated at 100% of yourself every single day when the demands are what they are and the spotlight's what it is. And I don't care how much these people earn, that's irrelevant. You're only capable of so much. So in that sense, of course, you get shot down if you ever moan about those things, because people are in really privileged positions that earn good money, and that's understandable. But at the same time, there needs to be an understanding. If you want the best quality, look at the injury rates across football in the last couple of years. They've gone up. There's no surprise. There's absolutely no surprise. On top of that, games have got longer. The ball in play time's higher. The added times going up as well. So the physical demands are going through the roof. So I think the demands on players and coaches is and I'm talking now about the top level, from looking from the outside into that. That is incredibly challenging to try and cope with that. And hopefully, as we settle back into a bit more of a normal calendar, that starts to level out a little bit, because at the moment, the relentlessness of it is a real challenge for people. And when you're in it, like I was, it can be, like I say, sort of Groundhog Day. And the smaller the club, the less the resources to almost make it an environment where you can have everything that you need in order to be successful.
Have you ever given up on a player in terms of it? You kind of had to for the betterment of a group, or is that something that you just will not do? I think again the cutthroat nature of it all, the sort of having to sort of let players go, whatever. It's obviously a thing within management. Is it something that sometimes you have to kind of step away and give up on a player a little bit?
Yeah, that sounds horrible, doesn't it? I think the reality of, as you manage a team, build a team, you've always got in your mind, what's the next cycle of this team look like? How long is someone's lifespan within that team? When is it going to end? So I guess that's a constant process that you know. And by the way, it works the other way. Players know that right at the end of the cycle is this year I'm going to be going. And the earlier you know that as a club, the better. And we manage that process well, in the fact that it's devastating when you lose your best players, but if you know it's coming, at least you're not like kiboshed by that at the end. Replacing them is another matter, but at least you know that's there. So I think that process of understanding that players need to be told, I think it's really important to be honest with people and tell them that like your game time or your opportunity here might be limited, whether that is just in contract or at the end of their contract. But I think the most important part is like, football's what they do, it's not who they are. So managing them as people is really important. And whilst you can, on one hand, tell a player that their game time may be limited and it's probably best if they look for something somewhere else, whilst they're at your club, you're 100% for them. One, because you might rely on them and need them anyway, but two, because you know how hard it is. So for me, it's almost trying to look after people the best way you can and be good with people and not make life horrible and difficult for them, because I think that's wrong. And respect the person is a really important part. And in what is I think a hard situation when players know it's coming to the end, or you know their time's coming to the end, it is difficult to manage that process. But you try to do it with the best intentions for the club, for the team, and for that individual.
And forgive me, the other side of that, you know, you've been assistant manager for people as well as being a manager yourself. Do you think there is a giving up from players when they can see the cloud circling on a manager or people like that? You know, the other side of it.
I don't think players ever down tools,
Yeah.
like which is often thrown
Chucked out
about,
there, isn't it? Yeah.
because in the end, the personal pride of being a professional and wanting to win, and you know your own, as we discussed, your own identity so often is judged or is just felt yourself by how you perform. Every single player goes on the pitch wanting to win. Now, they may go on the pitch lacking motivation or physically not at their best or low in confidence.
Slightly aggravated, yeah.
Because of the scenario that they're in. But they don't go out ever. I've never seen a player go consciously to hijack or sabotage a game.